Centuries ago, they saved us. Today we return the favor, and the galaxy will learn what loyalty really means. The galaxy had forgotten the moment when humanity was weak, but humans had not. Centuries ago, before Earth had fleets of steel and plasma cannons patrolling the stars, it had been a fragile blue world trying to survive among predators. When alien warlords descended upon the solar system, humanity's defenses had been nothing more than fragile satellites and outdated warships. Earth would have been crushed in weeks, maybe days, but they were not. A small coalition of distant worlds bound together not by power but by principle came to humanity's defense. Their fleets were not vast, their weapons not the strongest, but they fought with bravery and bought Earth the time it needed to survive. Countless lives were lost, not human lives but alien ones. Those who had no obligation to fight for Earth gave everything for it. Humanity never forgot. Generations passed, and Earth grew. Colonies spread across the stars, fleets of formidable ships were built, and humans transformed from survivors into warriors feared throughout the galaxy. Yet deep in their memory, in their culture, in their very blood, remained the story of the ones who had stood for them when they were helpless. Children were raised on tales of that sacrifice. Soldiers whispered the names of those alien worlds before battle. Humanity carried the debt like a scar across its soul. Now in the cold black of space, the time had come to repay it. The Kavar Dominion had risen like a storm. Ruthless, merciless, they spread across the stars with fleets that swallowed planets whole. They enslaved populations, tore down cities, and left worlds burning in silence. And now, their eyes turned to the same alliance that once protected Earth. In the council chambers of the Galactic Concord, representatives from dozens of species debated endlessly. Should they intervene? Should they risk their fleets? Should they sacrifice their peace? Words filled the chamber, but no action followed. Fear weighed heavily on the galaxy. Among them sat Laura Mitchell, humanity's ambassador. She listened to the endless speeches, the cowardice dressed as diplomacy. Her jaw was tight, her eyes cold. When her turn came, she rose slowly, every eye in the chamber following her. When Earth was on the edge of extinction, when our skies burned and our children cried, it was not this council that came to our aid. It was not words or resolutions that saved us. It was action. Action by those now under attack. Murmurs spread through the room. A few leaned forward, uneasy. Others rolled their eyes, expecting human dramatics. Laura's voice sharpened. We are not here to debate. We are not here to weigh profit and loss. We are here because a debt is owed. And humans. She paused, her gaze sweeping the chamber. Humans do not forget debts. A silence fell so deep it pressed against the ears. For a moment, even the most jaded counselors hesitated, but then the voices rose again, dismissive, mocking, fearful. They spoke of human recklessness, of unnecessary war, of suicide. They said humanity could not stand alone. Laura sat down without another word. The council had made its choice, but humanity had already made theirs. Far away in the cold hangars of Earth's orbital shipyards, fleets were assembling. Massive warships, their hulls dark and angular, bristling with weapons. Crews moved with quiet determination. Soldiers checked their armor, pilots ran final diagnostics. There was no hesitation, no debate. The orders were clear. Debts were to be repaid. And as Admiral Claire Davis stood on the bridge of the flagship Elysium, watching the stars slide past the viewport, she whispered a single sentence under her breath. They saved us once, now we save them. The galaxy believed humanity was driven by power. The galaxy thought humans sought conquest, but the galaxy had forgotten the truth. Humans fight hardest not for greed, not for glory, but for loyalty. And when humanity repays a debt, the stars themselves tremble. The Kavar Dominion struck with terrifying speed. World after world fell under their shadow. Ireland, a jewel of the Alliance, burned first. Its skies turned crimson as orbital bombardments rained fire upon its oceans and forests. Cities became ash. Families hid in underground shelters, listening as the ground shook with every strike from above. The Dominion left no time for surrender. They demanded obedience, and when it was not given, they erased civilizations as if they were nothing. In the outer colonies, transmissions of the attacks reached human command centers. Images of burning cities flashed across screens, the cries of civilians filling the airwaves. Soldiers watched in silence, fists clenched. Engineers froze mid-task, listening to voices begging for help, knowing the council had already refused to act. Humanity's leaders said nothing in public, but behind sealed doors, the decision had already been made. On Earth, in a dimly lit war room beneath the United Command Tower, Commander Alex Carter stood at attention with several senior officers. Maps of star systems glowed on the table before them, each one marked with the steady advance of the Dominion. Admiral Claire Davis entered the room, her expression carved from stone. "The Council won't intervene," she said flatly. No one was surprised. A low murmur spread, bitter, angry. Alex clenched his jaw. "They sit in their chambers, arguing about politics while cities burn," he muttered. Admiral Davis raised her eyes. "Which is why we will not wait for their permission." The room fell silent. Everyone knew what those words meant. Davis pressed her hands to the table, leaning forward. 3 centuries ago, they saved Earth. My grandfather told me stories of the fleets that bled for us when we were nothing. Without them, none of us would be here, and I will not stand by and watch them die. The officers exchanged glances. None objected. They didn't need orders to know what must be done. Preparations began in silence, but with a sense of gravity that shook every man and woman who wore the human uniform. Ships fueled faster than ever. Ammunition was loaded, and every fighter pilot was recalled from leave. Crews barely slept. In the hangars, soldiers painted symbols on their armor: wolves, eagles, lions, reminders of the strength they carried into battle. Meanwhile, across human colonies, families watched their loved ones leave. Mothers hugged children tightly at starports, whispering promises that they would return. Fathers embraced daughters dressed in combat armor, unable to hide the fear in their eyes. Husbands and wives stood at the edges of hangar decks as transports carried partners away into the black void. And still, no one spoke of hesitation. Everyone understood why. On the Elysium, Laura Mitchell prepared a final transmission for the Council. Her words were measured, sharp, and deliberate. She recorded it alone, without advisors or scripts. To the Galactic Council, humanity cannot sit idle while worlds burn. You call it reckless. You call it unnecessary. But we call it loyalty. When Earth faced annihilation, it was these worlds who stood in the line of fire for us. You may have forgotten. We have not. We act not for conquest, not for power, but because debts must be honored. History will remember who stood by the helpless and who turned their backs. She sent the transmission with no expectation of reply. The humans would fight alone. Days later, the first fleet slipped into enemy space. They moved in silence, without fanfare, without announcements. The Dominion didn't even know they were coming. On the bridge of the Elysium, Admiral Davis studied the hollow map of Ireland's orbit. Dominion warships circled the planet like predators over a carcass. Their forces were overwhelming, their confidence absolute. No one had ever dared to challenge them openly. "Status?" Davis asked calmly. "All ships in formation. Weapons charged. Crews ready," Alex Carter reported, his voice steady though his pulse raced. Davis gave a single nod. "Then we begin." The order was given, and for the first time since the Dominion's rampage began, the hunters would become the hunted. The Dominion's war drums echoed across the stars. Yet in the grand hall of the Galactic Council, where leaders from dozens of species sat in shimmering chambers of glass and light, the mood was not one of urgency. It was one of fear. The Council debated endlessly, their words colliding like sparks without ever forming a flame. Some argued intervention would be suicide. Others that the Kavar Dominion could not be stopped. Many whispered that perhaps it was wiser to surrender early, to give tribute rather than face destruction. Humanity's seat sat near the edge of the chamber, a deliberate placement by those who had never fully trusted the Terrans. Ambassador Laura Mitchell sat upright, hands folded on the desk before her, listening as one counselor after another offered excuses dressed as strategy. A representative from the Uren Collective, a species once known for courage, declared, "We cannot risk war with the Dominion. Their fleets are too vast. We must focus on defending our own borders." Another from the Zurai Confederacy hissed, "The alliance under attack is weak. Their sacrifice for humanity centuries ago was honorable, yes, but that was then. Times have changed." Laura's jaw tightened, her eyes narrowing. Finally, when the council leader called her name, she rose. The chamber quieted, though not out of respect, out of curiosity. The humans were expected to bluster, to make some emotional plea that would be dismissed as reckless. Her voice was steady, almost calm, but it carried weight. When Earth was dying, you all watched. The Dominion of that time was different, yes, but make no mistake, it was just as merciless. And when we begged for help, most of you sat in this chamber and did nothing. Only a few answered. They stood when we could not. They bled for us, and you would have us sit idle now? She let her gaze sweep the chamber. We are not here to beg for your fleets. We are not here to argue. We are here to tell you this. Humanity does not forget debts. We will honor what was given to us, even if we stand alone. For a heartbeat, the council was silent. A ripple of unease spread. But then the laughter began. Soft at first, then louder. Councilors shook their heads, muttering about human recklessness. A few smirked openly. The council leader, a withered figure with scales glinting in the chamber's light, leaned forward. Ambassador Mitchell, you speak of honor, but honor does not win wars. If your species chooses to march to destruction, that is your choice. But do not ask us to follow. Laura did not flinch. She simply said, history will remember. Then she sat back down, ignoring the chorus of dismissive voices around her. What none of them realized was that, even as they debated, the humans had already moved. Out in the cold darkness of slipspace, the first Terran fleet had crossed into contested territory. Crews stood at their stations, silent but resolved. They knew what was at stake. They knew the odds, and they knew that no one else would come. On the Elysium's bridge, Alex Carter stood beside Admiral Davis as the stars warped into streaks of light. His throat was dry, but his voice was clear when he said, "If we do this, there's no going back." Davis didn't look at him. Her eyes were locked on the forward display. We passed the point of no return the day the Council chose to look away. Now we show the galaxy what it means to carry a debt. The bridge fell silent. The hum of the engines filled the air like a heartbeat. Outside, the vastness of space swallowed everything, indifferent and endless. Yet within that silence, something powerful stirred. The weight of loyalty, the fire of memory, the fury of a people who refused to let kindness be forgotten. And as the fleet drew closer to the Dominion lines, every crew member aboard knew the same truth. They were about to write a message in fire across the stars. The Dominion had grown arrogant. Above the world of Ireland, their warships drifted in formation, engines burning with a crimson glow. They had crushed every defense the planet had mustered. What little resistance remained on the surface was scattered, broken, and waiting for the inevitable final strike. From orbit, Dominion commanders watched the cities below burn. Their voices were calm, mechanical, almost bored. This was just another conquest in a long chain of victories. And then the humans arrived. The first Terran fleet dropped from slipspace like thunder. The blackness of space tore open, and warships the size of mountains slid into position. Their hulls were dark, angular, bristling with weapons that glowed faintly against the stars. The humans made no announcement, no warning. They simply arrived, and the Dominion's scanners screamed as an entire armada appeared out of nowhere. On the Elysium's bridge, alarms chimed, and Alex Carter's heart hammered in his chest. He looked at Admiral Davis, who stood unmoving, eyes locked on the massive tactical display. Dominion forces are scrambling, he reported. They're moving to intercept. Davis didn't blink. Let them come. The Dominion fleet, confident in their superiority, surged forward. Their ships spread like blades, weaving into attack formations they had used to annihilate countless enemies before. Energy weapons flared, missiles streaked across the void, and the darkness lit with the fury of war. But the humans didn't retreat. They didn't flinch. Fire, Davis said, her voice steady. The Elysium shuddered as its main cannons unleashed a storm of blue-white plasma, streaking across space and smashing into the lead Dominion vessel. The enemy ship's shields collapsed in seconds, and the next volley tore the vessel apart in a blossom of fire and shattered hull plating. Across the human fleet, warships unleashed everything they had. Railguns thundered, missiles streaked silently across the void, and lances of plasma carved holes through Dominion lines. In the space of minutes, half a dozen enemy ships were torn apart. On Dominion channels, confusion spread. Their commanders barked orders, trying to regroup, but for the first time in decades, their enemy was not panicked. The humans moved like predators, coordinated and precise. Every maneuver was sharp, every strike purposeful. On the surface of Ireland, civilians huddled in shelters, watching the skies burn. For days, they had seen only the crimson glow of Dominion bombardments. Now streaks of blue and white cut across the heavens, The ground shook not from destruction but from the fury of a fleet that had come to defend them. In one shelter, a child tugged at his mother's sleeve. "Who are they?" he whispered. The mother stared upward, tears filling her eyes as human ships cut Dominion cruisers to pieces. "The ones we saved long ago," she whispered back. "They've come back for us." Back in orbit, the battle raged. Dominion ships tried to press forward, confident their numbers would overwhelm. But the humans fought with a ferocity that shattered their formations. Squadrons of Terran fighters dove into enemy lines, weaving through barrages of fire, striking engines and weapon bays with pinpoint precision. Alex Carter gripped the console as the Elysium's shields flared against enemy fire. "Shields holding at 80%. Redirect power," Davis ordered calmly. "Bring our forward batteries to bear. Cut them down." The flagship's cannons roared again, slicing through another Dominion cruiser. Explosions rippled outward, tearing enemy ships apart, their wreckage drifting into the void. For the first time, the Dominion realized they were not the hunters. They were prey. In their command vessel, a Dominion warlord slammed his fist against the console, his voice cracking with disbelief. "How are they resisting us? They're only Terrans." His second-in-command stared at the tactical display, watching their fleet collapse ship by ship. He whispered the words like a curse. "They're not fighting for conquest. They're fighting for something else." "What?" the warlord snarled. The second-in-command swallowed. "They're fighting for loyalty." And in that moment, the Dominion knew fear. On the surface of Ireland, the war was not fought in the silence of space, but in the screams of broken streets. Buildings lay in ruins, smoke curling into the sky. Fires burned unchecked, casting orange light over shattered plazas. Civilians huddled in the remains of their homes, trying to stay quiet as Dominion patrols stalked the ruins. The enemy moved like machines, armored and merciless, their voices harsh and metallic as they dragged survivors into transports for slavery. Captain Daniel Harris crouched behind a wall of rubble, his armor scarred from the dropship landing. Around him, a squad of Terran Marines checked their weapons, eyes sharp, jaws clenched. Above them, streaks of fire marked the fall of escape pods and gunships. Humanity was not only fighting in orbit now, they were on the ground. "Command, this is Harris," he whispered into his comm. "We've landed on Sector 12. Dominion forces heavy, civilians scattered, moving to extract survivors." The reply came steady and cold. "Understood. Do what you can. No one gets left behind." Harris motioned to his squad, and they advanced through the ruined streets. The crack of rifles echoed as they engaged Dominion soldiers, blue bolts of plasma carving through alien armor. The Terrans moved fast, precise, relentless. Every corner they turned, another squad of Dominion troopers fell. But it was not just about killing. It was about saving. In the basement of a collapsed building, Harris found them. A group of civilians, dozens of them, huddled together in fear. Their eyes widened when they saw the humans enter, weapons raised. For a breathless moment, no one moved. Then a child stepped forward. His voice was trembling but clear. "Are you Terrans?" Harris removed his helmet, revealing a face streaked with sweat and dirt. He nodded once. "We're here to take you home." The civilians gasped, tears welling in their eyes. An older man whispered almost to himself. They remembered. After all this time, they remembered. One of Harris's Marines, a young soldier named Ryan, leaned closer to the captain. "Sir, they're looking at us like we're legends." Harris's jaw tightened. "Not legends, just people keeping a promise." The evacuation began, but it was not easy. The Dominion pushed hard, throwing waves of soldiers at the Terrans. Plasma fire cut through the streets, grenades detonated against walls, and the night burned with chaos. But the humans fought with a fury no Dominion warrior had ever seen. At one point, Harris dragged a wounded civilian onto his shoulder while firing his rifle with the other hand. A Dominion trooper leapt from the shadows, blade raised high, but Ryan tackled him before the strike could land, wrestling the alien into the dirt and finishing him with a knife. The civilians watched in awe, realizing these soldiers would rather die than leave them behind. As they moved toward extraction, one young woman grabbed Harris's arm. Her voice shook. "Why are you doing this? Why risk so much for us?" Harris met her eyes, sweat dripping down his brow, and answered with the same words every soldier had been raised on. "Because once you risked everything for us, we don't forget." The words spread like fire through the crowd. Civilians whispered them to each other as they were herded toward waiting transports. They clung to the phrase like a prayer. Above the battlefield, human ships began to descend, raining fire upon Dominion reinforcements. Dropships streaked across the sky, disgorging more Terran Marines who pushed the enemy back street by street. For the first time in weeks, the people of Ireland looked upward and saw not destruction, but hope. And when the last of the transports lifted off, carrying civilians to safety, the survivors pressed their hands against the viewports, watching the human soldiers still on the ground, still fighting. One elderly man, voice hoarse with emotion, whispered the words to himself as he looked out into the burning night. They came back for us. After all this time, they came back. In that moment, the lesson spread beyond the battlefield, beyond the planet itself. Across the galaxy, intercepted transmissions showed Terran Marines shielding civilians with their bodies, carrying children through fire, and refusing to abandon even a single life. The message was clear. Humanity was not fighting for territory, not for glory, not for empire. They were fighting for loyalty. And the Dominion, for the first time in their existence, began to understand what it meant to face an enemy who carried the weight of memory like a weapon. The Dominion fleet had begun to crumble. Every orbital engagement had been decisive. Every ground battle had shown that humans would not yield, that they would fight not for conquest but for loyalty. And now the once mighty Dominion had no choice but to retreat. Their lines faltered, their commanders panicked, and entire warships drifted powerless, their crews abandoning them in despair. On the bridge of the Elysium, Admiral Claire Davis watched the last Dominion ship scatter across the void. Her face was calm, but her eyes burned with the intensity of every life that had been saved. Alex Carter leaned over her console. "They're breaking. The rest of their fleet is in retreat." Davis nodded. "Good. Make sure they remember why." Below, Captain Daniel Harris and his Marines secured the last of the cities. Civilians cheered as human soldiers appeared at street corners, distributing supplies, helping the wounded, and comforting the frightened. The people of Ireland, once abandoned, now looked upon the humans as guardians, saviors, and legends. The survivors from the original alliance arrived in transport ships, many of them war-weary, many doubting that anyone would intervene. When they saw the humans standing among the ruins, faces streaked with sweat and dirt, weapons still smoking, disbelief turned to tears. They had fought alone for centuries, expecting no help, and yet here it was, loyalty fulfilled in the most undeniable way. A representative of the alien alliance stepped forward, trembling. We did not think anyone would come." Captain Harris gave a simple nod. "We remembered." Word of the human intervention spread faster than any fleet could travel. Across the galaxy, broadcasts intercepted the battles and ground operations. They saw humans saving lives, fighting without hesitation, refusing to leave a single ally behind. The message was clear. Humanity never forgets. Humanity never abandons those who once stood for them. The Galactic Council, watching from their chambers, could no longer deny what had happened. Their political debates, their cowardice, their hesitation, all were exposed. They saw not a species seeking glory, but a species bound by honor, carrying debts across centuries, and willing to bleed for them. In a rare council session, the representatives of the alien worlds who had once saved Earth rose together. Their voices trembled but carried across the chamber with authority. "Humanity has shown us what it means to honor a debt. We were saved once. Today we are saved again. Let it be known across the galaxy. The Terrans keep their word." Admiral Davis stood before her bridge crew, watching as the last Dominion remnants fled into the void. "This is not victory," she said softly. "This is a reminder, a promise kept." Alex Carter looked out the viewport at the scattered, battered fleet of survivors and the burning remains of Dominion ships. "The galaxy will remember this," he said quietly. Davis allowed herself a small, grim smile. "Yes, and they'll remember that humanity is not to be underestimated, not for strength, not for firepower, but for loyalty, for honor, for debt." As the fleets turned back toward safe space, carrying survivors, civilians, and freed worlds, the galaxy fell silent, taking in the lesson. The Terrans had proven what few others could understand. Debts carried by humans are never forgotten, and when humans repay them, the universe itself bears witness. The stars seemed to shimmer differently that night, as if acknowledging the power of loyalty over fear, and across the galaxy, a single truth became clear. When humanity remembers a debt, every action, every sacrifice, every life is dedicated to ensuring that promise is kept. For the humans, it was simple. They had been saved once and they had returned the favor. That was all that mattered. And for the Dominion and every other power in the galaxy, it was a warning they would never forget. Humans do not forgive easily. Humans do not forget, and when a debt must be repaid, the galaxy itself remembers. The Dominion's fleet had scattered, their ships limping into the void, engines flickering as crews struggled to maintain control. The blackness of space, once filled with fire and death, was now eerily quiet, interrupted only by the hum of human warships patrolling the remnants of the battlefield. On the Elysium, Admiral Claire Davis leaned over the tactical display, her eyes scanning for any signs of regrouping. Every alert that flashed brought a measure of tension, but the truth was undeniable. The Dominion had been broken. Alex Carter, standing beside her, exhaled slowly. His shoulders sagged, though his face remained tight with concentration. They're retreating faster than expected. Most of their forces won't survive the pullback through this system without intervention, he said, his voice carrying the weight of countless lives already lost. Davis nodded, her hand still resting on the console. Let them go. There's no point in chasing ghosts. This isn't about revenge. It's about sending a message. Every world in this galaxy must understand what it means to carry a debt and honor it. Below them, Captain Daniel Harris coordinated the final extraction teams. Streets that had been unrecognizable wastelands hours before were now filled with the echoes of hope. Civilians moved cautiously among the ruins, guided by Terran soldiers who offered not only protection but reassurance. Children clung to their parents, mothers and fathers holding each other as they watched the humans pass. For many, it was impossible to believe that after centuries, the species they had once saved had returned, not for politics, not for power, but for something far greater: loyalty. In one of the collapsed city districts, Harris came across an elderly man who had remained on his rooftop, too stubborn to leave despite the danger. The man's eyes were wide with disbelief as he watched Harris and his squad carry a family to safety. The soldiers moved with efficiency, but their actions were deliberate, filled with care. Each decision was guided by instinct, yes, but also by something deeper. They're real, the man whispered to himself, almost reverently. They really came back. Harris approached him, armor dented and scorched from battle. We remembered, he said simply. That's why we're here. The man blinked rapidly, tears slipping down his cheeks. I don't know how to thank you. Live, Harris said, his voice steady, carrying the weight of every promise humanity had ever made. That's thanks enough. Meanwhile, in orbit, the Elysium coordinated with dozens of human warships and dropships. Every survivor of the battle, every civilian rescued, every Dominion ship destroyed, sent ripples across the galaxy. In a corner of space that had once been silent, transmissions now crackled, captured by sensors, intercepted by distant worlds. Every broadcast carried the same undeniable truth. Humans had returned to repay a debt, and the scale of their loyalty was unmatched. On Ireland's surface, civilians began to move freely, though cautiously. The ruined streets, scorched by Dominion fire and human explosives alike, were littered with remnants of both hope and tragedy. And yet, even amidst the ruins, a sense of awe permeated the air. Survivors told one another stories that would last generations. Of soldiers who had carried children over burning streets. Of medics who worked tirelessly without hesitation. Of pilots who had risked their lives to shield entire neighborhoods from orbital strikes. In one small plaza, a young girl approached a Marine named Ryan, eyes wide with curiosity. She tugged at his sleeve, her small voice barely audible over the distant sounds of recovery. Why did you come for us? Ryan knelt, meeting her gaze. Because once someone did the same for us. We don't forget. The simplicity of his words struck her like a revelation. She ran back to her family, repeating it over and over, and soon it echoed through the streets. Humans did not act for glory. Humans did not act for power. Humans acted because promises mattered. Above, in the council chambers, representatives from countless species were watching the aftermath unfold. Screens flickered with live feeds from Ireland and the surrounding system. Many had been skeptical, dismissive, even mocking of humanity's willingness to fight alone. But now seeing the Terrans save entire cities, crush the Dominion fleet and protect civilians without asking for anything in return, even the most hardened counselors were forced to reconsider. A member of the Galtor species, known for their cold pragmatism, leaned forward in disbelief. They're not taking anything. No demands. No territories. They're leaving the world in our hands just as it was, but they've destroyed the Dominion forces that threatened us all. Another, a representative from the Zurai Confederacy, whispered, "This is unprecedented. They're not fighting for power. They're fighting for honor, for loyalty, and it works." Back on Ireland, Captain Harris walked among the survivors, checking on medics, coordinating supply drops, and quietly observing the people he had fought to save. The war was over here, but the memories would last. Survivors looked at humans with a mixture of fear and gratitude. Children clung to soldiers they had only just met, believing them to be heroes sent by the stars themselves. In a makeshift communications tent, Harris overheard a transmission between Admiral Davis and Ambassador Mitchell. "The Dominion's remnants will flee to the outer systems," Davis said. "We need to ensure no one thinks they can regroup. Every message must be clear. Humans repay debts and nothing less." Mitchell responded, her tone measured but firm. "The Council has seen enough. Even if they refuse to act, the galaxy now knows the truth. Human loyalty cannot be ignored, questioned, or underestimated." Above the planet, the Elysium and accompanying fleet began their slow withdrawal. Ships drifted in formation, each one carrying civilians, supplies, and the knowledge that a debt had been repaid. Outside, the black void stretched endlessly, dotted with stars that seemed indifferent, but perhaps, just perhaps, had taken note of humanity's unwavering resolve. As the fleets passed through the last of Ireland's orbit, Harris paused and looked back at the planet. Fires still burned in some areas, smoke rising in thin columns, but life persisted. Survivors waved, some with tears streaming down their faces. Children shouted their thanks. Parents bowed, elders whispered prayers, and through it all the soldiers of Earth understood the quiet, unspoken truth. They had delivered more than military victory. They had delivered hope. The Dominion, scattered and broken, had no choice but to retreat. The warlord who had once commanded fleets now floated in a command vessel with a skeleton crew. Watching the Terran armada vanish into the distance, he whispered bitterly to no one in particular. They fought for loyalty, for something we can never understand. The Terrans, they are different. Meanwhile, the Galactic Council reconvened. Silence filled the chambers as transmissions from Ireland and nearby systems played across every screen. Counselors whispered among themselves, many pale, many angry at their previous inaction. Ambassador Mitchell stood and addressed the assembly. "Let this be clear," she said, her voice steady and unwavering. "Humans do not forget. We repay debts. We honor loyalty. The galaxy may doubt us, underestimate us, or fear us, but let no one ever mistake humanity's commitment to its promises. Those who saved us once, we will never abandon. Those who face injustice, we will never ignore. This is not conquest. This is honor. This is loyalty. And it is a warning humanity remembers." The chamber fell silent. Every representative understood the weight of her words, even if they did not fully grasp the depth of human resolve. Across the galaxy, word would spread. The humans had not only defeated the Dominion, but they had also reshaped how every species would perceive them from that day forward. On the bridge of the Elysium, Admiral Davis finally allowed herself a small, rare smile. Alex Carter beside her noticed it and said, "Do you think they'll understand?" "They'll never forget," she replied. And that is enough. As the Terran fleet moved toward deep space, leaving Ireland and its survivors safe, the stars themselves seemed to hold their breath. Stories of loyalty, courage, and humanity's repayment of a debt would echo across systems for centuries. The galaxy had learned a truth it would never unlearn. When humans repay debts, the universe itself bears witness. And for Earth, for its soldiers, for every human who had fought and bled and survived, it was simple. They had been saved once and they had returned the favor. Nothing more was needed. No recognition, no tribute, just the quiet satisfaction of a promise kept, a debt repaid, and a galaxy reminded that humans never forget. Even in the darkest reaches of space, even against the most ruthless enemies, humanity had shown what it meant to honor a debt, and the universe would remember. The stars seemed to shimmer differently that night, and across every system that had watched, one truth became impossible to deny. Humans fight not for power, not for glory, but for loyalty. And when a debt is repaid, nothing, not even the vastness of space, can erase it.